In my recent video of random weird images, I showed this one, only these sides up, which I found on the side of a boxed product at the logistics company I used to work for. Quite a few people were quick to point out that this label makes perfect sense, but does it really? No, it doesn't make sense, and I'm not saying that to be snarky to the people who said it did, or indeed to the people who made the label who had the very best of intentions, but rather I think there's an interesting little piece of thinking and process to explore here. You have a product, let's say it's a big ceramic dish. It's well padded and packed in a box, but stacking this box on any of its edges might result in the rim of the dish getting an impact or shock that would break it. And anyway, stacking the box on one of its narrow edges is pretty unstable. It might topple and fall, risking breakage. There are only two ways to safely stack this box, on either of the two large flat faces, the top and the bottom, like this or like this. To convey this specific message to the people handling the boxes, you create an advisory label, unique in all the world, only these sides up, so people handling the box will understand that it should only be stacked this way up or that way up. The label makes perfect sense as a piece of logic, but it's a bad solution to the problem at hand. Let's look at why that is. Firstly, when the box is stacked on what was originally its top face, the text on the label is now upside down, even though one of the arrows is pointing up. Some people find that difficult. Nextly, this is not a great solution because it's not intuitive or standard, and yet it's to be received in an environment that runs on standardized signage and message and symbology. This label is weird. Nobody's seen this instruction before, so they have to read it and comprehend it. Not necessarily difficult, but more difficult than dealing with something else that's very familiar and already widely and immediately understood. Furthermore, people may simply ignore this weird instruction or waste time trying to understand it, or waste effort turning boxes over. Someone might have correctly understood the instruction that it can be stacked either way. Someone else might turn them over in order to be able to read the text properly. Additional time, additional handling, waste, and also the slightly increased risk of damage during that additional handling. Finally, the label was so weird that the IT guy wasted a moment of his paid working day to take a photo of this weird label to later upload in a YouTube video. Waste. So I'm saying that's a bad solution, not the right solution. So what is the right solution, or at least what's a better solution? Well, your product can be stacked on two opposite sides, like this or like this. Either side is fine. So just pick one of those two sides, designate it as top, apply industry standard this way up labels, done. Use a label that the whole world already knows, understands, and can process immediately and symbolically at a brief glance, and with which they can comply almost without really thinking much about it. Now, I know what you might be thinking, that standard label also has text on it which doesn't work when it's upside down. Except it does. If everyone's doing their job, this label will only be seen one way up. And also, because this label is so familiar and commonplace, people recognise it as a whole picture with meaning, rather than studying its individual components, very much in the same way that people recognise words as pictures rather than individual letters. Except when it's an unfamiliar label or an unfamiliar word, we revert to looking at the components to figure out what it means, which is what happens with this non-standard label. It's true that your product has two different options for the way up it can be safely stacked, but that truth is irrelevant. Only one way up is actually required. Just pick one of them and run with that. Don't invent a special unique solution for a problem that is already solved. Or actually, don't invent a solution for a problem that isn't the problem at all. In this case, the problem, which was actually stack this thing flat, was subtly redefined into a completely different problem, that there was a need to try to communicate two possible options for stacking this carton. This redefined problem needs an exotic solution, whereas the real problem was already solved before you set out. Now, at this point, I think it's important to acknowledge the irony that attacking problems the wrong way is something I personally attempt quite routinely and deliberately, trying to make a keyboard out of a keyboard, making a pie with a crust on the inside, or making the world's worst camera out of a scanner and projector, for example. And I think doing things wrong or courting mistake, error and omission on purpose, and the general pursuit of nonsense can be a great source of inspiration and discovery and learning, or just fun. Why not? As an art form, or in development or innovation or educational contexts, yes, but what if we do it the wrong way is a fine question. No, a great question, a superb question. But this label is for none of those contexts. It's a really trivial example of a very common phenomenon, reinventing the wheel only to end up making an inferior wheel. And there's quite an important principle just under the surface here. In a busy commercial production context, instead of how do we solve this problem, a better question is often, has someone else already solved this problem? Or maybe, is this really the problem, or is it something else instead? business project teams will generally not thank you for asking that second question because it seems like going backwards, and they may already be itching to go galloping off forwards in search of a solution to the problem, perhaps without realizing that the problem has been very poorly defined in the first place. So are you in a job where you're solving a problem? Are you solving the problem or just a problem? I hope this little musing has been interesting. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.